So I was just sitting here in my office doing a little work and I didn't have my do not disturb on. And so this thing pops up and it's a message from one of you beautiful listeners out there. And usually I don't hop over and answer messages right away if I'm in the middle of something, but today I did and I'm glad that I did because the question that she asked me and my response to it as I was writing it, I thought, this has got to be an episode because this is a question that I get so many times from so many mamas, and I know it's going to help you. And that question is, what do you do when you find out you're pregnant and you don't have a clue what your dates are? You don't know when your last period was. Maybe you're not cycling regularly for various reasons, and you're like, what am I going to do? I don't want an ultrasound. How do I do this? So that is the question she asked me, and I'm going to tell you how I responded to her because I think it's going to help you too. Let's go. Hey, Mama, you have found your way home. This is If Mama Ain't Healthy, Ain't Nobody Healthy, and I'm your host, Lori Morris. I'm a Christian wife, mom, and midwife, and I'm so glad you're finally here. I know you're tired of feeling bounced around the system, never feeling heard or understood, and you're sick and tired of feeling sick and stuck. Whether you're trying to conceive, pregnant, or in the months and years after pregnancy, I want you to know I'm here to help you find your way out of confusion and into true wellness by working with God's beautiful design, not against it. From your physical health to your emotional and spiritual health, there is no topic off limits as we walk together through all seasons of motherhood. So if you're ready to step out of the world's way and into God's way of living well and loving life, take a short break from changing diapers and cleaning the kitchen again for the third time today and sit a spell with me. What you learn today could change generations. All right, quick review time. Today's review comes from my friend, Rachel Valentine. Like I said, know her, but I think she just recently found my podcast. And so she was so sweet to take the time to leave me a review. She said, so thankful for this podcast. I'm so grateful to have found Lori and her podcast. This is an invaluable resource for mamas and women in general who are looking to do better for themselves and their families. Thank you so much for that, Rachel, for taking the time to leave me a review. I appreciate that so much. And I appreciate all of your reviews because they help me to grow and to find other mamas just like you who are looking for this type of faith-based content. So please continue to share, continue to leave reviews if you haven't already. And if you haven't, just take 30 quick seconds, hop over to Apple Podcasts, leave me a quick 5-star written review so that I can find other mamas like you. Okay. On to today's episode, which is a bit of a riff, meaning I'm just kind of doing this on the fly. I didn't write out my normal full outline to remind me what to say because I had just written this review, written this response to a mama who sent me a message on Facebook. And so this response that I sent her, when I got done with it, I even sent it to her. I said, I think I just wrote my next podcast outline, and I did, because this information I find is not really addressed out there. We know all the what to do things. We know that if you don't have your last period, if you don't know your dates, we know that you can get an ultrasound. You know that, right? We've talked about that before. You know that first trimester ultrasounds give great dates. Okay. But we also know that first trimester ultrasounds aren't always the best option. And in fact, I would argue maybe you're never the best option because of the potential impact they can have on our babies. And so many of you, after learning about how ultrasounds work and all that, have decided you don't want first trimester ultrasounds. You don't want to go to a practice that requires you to get a first trimester ultrasound. But what do you do if you don't know your dates and you don't want a first trimester ultrasound? Again, I know for all of you other midwives who maybe don't agree with what I'm saying, or maybe even OBs who don't agree with what I'm saying, I know that you can get good dates from first trimester ultrasounds. No question about it. I get that. However, it's a trade-off. It's a risk-benefit analysis. And at the end of the day, it is mama's decision about whether she wants to have an ultrasound or not. It's her choice. And so if she chooses not to, if you, mama, choose not to have an ultrasound, what are you supposed to do? How do you manage this? So let's talk about this. How do you even get in a situation to start with? Well, maybe you're not trying to get pregnant, so you're not tracking your cycles, you're not paying attention to your cycles. You might not even be having regular cycles, especially if you maybe are still breastfeeding and your cycles haven't come back regularly. There's other situations that can impact that as well. But there are situations where you take a pregnancy test, you get the little pink line, but you don't have a clue when your last cycle was, or even if you had a cycle, okay? And you know that we base guest dates, due dates, off of the first date of the last period. So what do you do? Well, first of all, I want you to think about, do we even need due dates or guest dates? I know the medical world needs them because I know how they work. And I know the anxiety behind it, the fear behind it is, oh, but what if my baby comes early? I get all those reasons. I get, if my baby comes early, I want to be in the right place. I get all of that. But let's think about what percentage are actually having these early babies. If you're well nourished and you don't have other issues going on, most people aren't having babies early, they're having them late by the medical standards. We're worried about going past 40 weeks, past 42 weeks, right? We're not worried about the early babies. So let's try to get off of the fear-based mentality of, oh, but what if my baby's early? And I'm going to give you a little bit more reason that you don't need to worry about that in just a second. I want you to look back over history. So guest dates, due dates, whatever you want to call them, were not even a thing before the 18th century. They came around in the 1700s. There was a Dutch professor who observed only 100 women, okay, 100 women. And he came up with, I guess, the average and suggested that pregnancy should be dated 9 months plus 7 days. Okay. He didn't specify whether it was from the first day of your period or the last day of your period. He just said 9 months and 7 days. Then fast forward to about 1812, that's when Nagel's rule came along, and Nagel's rule solidified this. It put it in textbooks. It made people really start doing it. And his was also right around 9 months plus 7 days. It's just a little bit longer of a calculation. And now it is 280 days from the first day of your last menstrual period. Okay. So that's about 40 weeks from the first day of your last period. And that is the same for everyone. Now, there's some calculation differences that some calculators will propose to you. I've gone over that in a previous episode. I should have looked up which one that was, but I didn't. But there's some nuance here. Yet everybody's treated the same. Everybody gets the same 280 days by the medical system standards. Beyond that, most providers won't even see you if you haven't had your first trimester ultrasound. They completely ignore your period anyway. They're just going to go by what the ultrasound tells them. So my question to you is, what did all those women in the 6,000 years before these rules came along, what did they do? Did their babies just, cease to exist because there was no due date? Did awful things always happen? Well, of course not. And I hear you saying, oh yeah, they did. Bad things happen. Babies died. Just go to cemeteries. Look, they died. They died in birth a lot. But did they? Or did most of those deaths actually happen after birth due to sanitation issues and the sicknesses that arose from the fact that sanitation was really poor back in that time? It's not so much that babies were dying in birth. It was what happened after, once they were out and living, that tended to cause so many of these baby deaths. And I know that because our fetal death rate or our infant mortality rate is awful. It's the worst in America, and it's actually gone up from then. So all these arguments that you've heard that have put this fear in you don't necessarily hold water. So back to the original question, why do we need to have a guest date? Why does it matter? Well, for the medical world, it matters because honestly, they want to know when they can induce you and when they can start pushing these things on you. They also want to know when to do all their testing because all of their tests revolve around what gestational age you are, how many weeks you are. So, when they're going to do the glucose test, when they're going to do your GBS, when they're going to do all these different things, it's all based on how many weeks you are. So they really, really, really need to know. But my question to you is, and I keep asking you questions. You see, I'm trying to get you to think critically. I'm trying to get you to really dig into this in your own mind. If we have decided that this medical system maybe isn't really always in it for our good, and if we have decided that maybe it's not even where we need to be giving birth, which many of you have, why do we bow to their want for this date? Why do we let them dictate what we're going to do so that they feel better? The message I got today is like the ones that I get from pretty much everybody when this question comes up, and it is full of anxiety. Lots of anxiety. Everybody's worried about not having this date that we already know isn't even all that accurate. We already know that we cannot predict the day that a baby will be born because only God knows the day that that baby will be born. We can have our guess date all day long if we want to, and that's a 5 week window, because let's say we know our date and that date is for the 40-week mark, but you can deliver 3 weeks before that or 2 weeks after that, and it's really okay. It's a 5 week window. So what good is this date really? I'm going to tell you what I told this most recent mama. And I say most recent mama because lots of y'all have asked me this question. Because as I was typing it, as I mentioned earlier, I thought about what would I do if I was in this case? I never was, but what if I was? How would I actually handle it at this point in my life? And this is not your typical medical advice, of course. What do I tell you that is typical medical advice, right? And I want disclaimer, everybody's situation is different, yada, yada, yada. You know, all the things that this can't be official medical advice. You've got to do your own due diligence, but I'm going to just tell you what I would do. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read my response to her, and I'm going to stop at certain points to elaborate. All right. So, first, I thanked her and said some things like that. Her last paragraph, by the way, focused on what do I do if the baby comes early. So that, just so that you understand what I'm about to say. I said, first, your last paragraph put all the quote need to know on the low chance of preterm birth. So the need to know the date. It was all focused on what if I have an early baby. Now, this particular mom doesn't have a lot of options where she is, and she's pretty much stuck. If she's other than having a free birth, which she's not comfortable with, her only option really is to go to the hospital. Okay. So I said, if you're saying your only option is to birth at a hospital anyway, which she was, why does it matter if you're term or preterm? Think about that. And I know some of the questions that are coming to your head, but stick with me. I'm going to answer them. With the knowledge you have, which she had given me a few things where she thought that maybe it could have been this date, maybe it could have been that date. She wasn't exactly sure, but she had a guess. And I said, with that knowledge that she already has, you've got a decent window of how far along you think you are. She was guessing maybe 5 or 6 weeks. So she's got a decent guess. Usually we'll have a decent guess based on, just events that happen, maybe when we know we could have conceived and that kind of thing. Once you get past 20 weeks and you're having your fundus measured, you'll know how close those measurements are to what you would expect them to be based on those dates. Okay, let me expand on that a little bit. If you haven't had a baby before, or maybe even if you have and you didn't really know what they were doing, when you get to about 20 weeks, your provider practitioner usually will start, or almost always will start, measuring your fundal height. The fundus is the top of your uterus. We measure that from the top of your pelvic bone to the top of your uterus, your fundus, called your fundal height. At about 20 weeks, your fundus is usually at your belly button if you only have one baby in there. So usually right around 20 weeks, we're right at that belly button. Past that, we start measuring. Okay, how do we measure? We take a tape measure, like sewing tape measure, or the kind that like retract into the little holder thingy, and we measure on the centimeter side from the top of the pelvic bone again up to the top of the fundus, and that is a centimeter reading, and that centimeter reading is usually ±2 from your gestational age. So for example, if we do your fundal height measurement and it's 22 centimeters, you are usually 20 weeks to 24 weeks. Honestly, that's a 4 week window of possibility, and that's about as good as you're going to have anyway, even if you had an exact date. Because even if you have an exact date and you know exactly when you're due, you know the baby can come 2 to 3 weeks before, 2 to 3 weeks after, right? So we know within a window of how far along you are, and that growth should stay consistent throughout your pregnancy. So if you're 22 centimeters this visit and you come back in 4 weeks, you should be 26 centimeters, because you should be growing 1 centimeter per week, because again, 1 centimeter equals 1 week in the measurement. I hope that didn't just completely throw you off, but what I'm saying is you can know whether or not you have dates on an ultrasound or dates from a period. You can know your gestational age based on where your uterus is in your belly and the measurement of it within ±2 weeks. which, by the way, is how accurate we get from that 20-week scan. Okay, so again, once you get past 20 weeks and you're having your fundus measure, you're going to know about where you are. So for this mama, thinks she's 5 to 6 weeks. That would mean in, let's see, 14 weeks ish, her fundus should be at her belly button. And then after that, the measurements start, and we can know pretty close how accurate her guess dates are. Okay, is this making sense? I hope so. Until then, what is the rush to run off to a provider? What is the rush? What are they doing? What do they really do at this point anyway? Prenatal care these days is not the education that it ought to be, the education that helps you stay healthy and low risk. Prenatal visits today are measurements, and they are tests, and they're blood tests, and they're looking at all the things to try to find out all the reasons why something's wrong with you and they need to intervene. That's what prenatal care has become. You've got like 3 minutes with your actual doctor or midwife if you're seeing a medical practice. They're not doing any real education. So what's the rush? Why are we trying to get there? It doesn't make sense to me. Okay. Back to the email. What's the rush to run off to a provider? And do they really do this? What do they really do at this point anyway? They should be educating you, but they're not. In the first trimester, the reason that you would want, and in these early weeks, the reason you want prenatal care is for that education to make sure that you're taking good care of yourself so that your baby has the best chance to be healthy, but they're not doing that, okay? They're not spending really much of any time. They might give you a few handouts, they may glaze over a few things, but are they really doing any in-depth education? No. All right. All they're doing, back to the email, all they're doing is testing and finding reasons for you to be, quote, high risk. If something is wrong at this stage, meaning, before 20 weeks in this first trimester, if something is wrong in this stage, there's really nothing they or you can do about it. I've talked about that in prior podcasts. There's just not much you can do other than nourish yourself well and take good care of yourself. Other than that, it's a waiting game and a trusting God game. Okay. So if I wake up in your shoes, what I'm doing is, all right, here's where I tell her what I would do, because I really thought it through. I kind of hadn't thought about it a whole lot. Like, what would I do if I didn't have dates? I hadn't really thought about it much about what I would actually do, but now I have. Here's what I'm doing. I'm not being seen until around 20 weeks. Now I hear you saying, but how do you know you're 20 weeks? You don't have dates. Remember what I just told you. At around 20 weeks, that uterus is going to be at your belly button. Okay. And if you use a tape measure around then, you're going to get right around 20 centimeters. And then if the next week you use it again, you're getting around 21 centimeters and 22 centimeters. These are things you can do. You don't have to have a medical degree to take a fundal height, okay? So when you are estimating that you're getting pretty close to 20 weeks, then go be seen. So I'm not being seen until I'm around 20 weeks. I'm taking a course like mine, meaning the online Christian childbirth education class, ASAP, so that I can learn everything I need to know about nutrition now. And I'm doing it all. See, all the things that they should be teaching you in these prenatal visits, but they're not, I do teach you in that course, okay? And I teach you thoroughly. So if I'm in your shoes, I don't know what my dates are, I don't know, about when to expect, I'm going to go ahead and get in that course ASAP, and I'm going to watch it now, and I'm going to do it all, especially in that module about nutrition. I'm going to consume that maybe once or twice or 3 times, and I'm going to apply it all. I'm making sure I'm nourishing myself well, because that's really all I can control, and that's what you're going to learn. I think it's module 2 in the course where we go deep into nutrition. All right. Then when I go in at 20 weeks ish, again, we don't know exactly, but when I go in at 20 weeks, I will probably let them do the 20-week anatomy scan. Now, why do I say that after what I say about ultrasounds? Well, I did have the 20-week anatomy scan for all of my pregnancies because I was planning a home birth, and I wanted to make sure that there weren't any incompatibilities with a home birth. Now, I told the ultrasound techs to go really fast. I didn't want all of the details. I just wanted to make sure there weren't any cardiac anomalies, and that like all the internal parts that make things work the way they need to work at birth were there. And so that's what I did. But see, while they're doing that 20-week ultrasound, they're going to also do measurements, and those measurements will give them an estimated due date within, here it is again, plus or minus 2 weeks. Same exact window as what you're getting off of Fundle Heights. Same exact window, really, as you have even if you have a first trimester ultrasound, because if you have a date from a first trimester ultrasound and it says you are due on August the 1st, then that doesn't mean that baby's going to be born August the 1st. It might be born 3 weeks before that. It might be born 3 weeks after that, right? You really don't ever have anything better than plus or minus 2 weeks. All right. So you go in, you get the 20-week scan, they get their dates that they want. They're not as accurate as they want, but that actually works out well too if you're wanting to stay away from all the intervention. Because see, now they have this date. It says the scan will give them dates that they want, but only within plus or minus 2 weeks of accuracy. So anytime they want to push for induction, they really can't. Because what if you're on the early side of that plus or minus 2 week window? They can't risk it. And you have all you need to do you have all the information that you need to respectfully decline the induction they want you to have. Then you just keep caring for yourself well, and you decline any testing that you don't think is going to actually impact your plan, and you wait for baby to come in God's time. There's your answer. Now, I hear some of you saying, but what if I'm early? And what if I go into labor early? Remember, if you're doing these fundal height checks, which you will be once you go into the care system, they're going to know pretty close how far along you are. Okay, I said plus or minus 2 weeks, or from plus or minus 2 centimeters from the number of weeks you are, and that's true. But very often it's right on it, or maybe off just by one. So like if you're going in and this week they measured you and they measured 34 centimeters, you're pretty close to 34 weeks. So they know. So if you're right around 37 weeks, they might not stop your labor, but they certainly won't encourage it. If you're around 34 weeks, they probably will try to do things to stop it. You see, this isn't as scary and as hard and fast as they want you to think it is. So stop letting them control you by fear. We don't believe in most of what they do. So many of you have learned from me and you agree with that. Maybe you don't. If you don't, that's fine. But if you do, you know that we don't believe that most of what they're doing is needed. We believe in God. We believe that He knows best. So when are we going to start leaning on that? When are we going to start thinking about all of these generations and generations and generations and centuries worth of women who gave birth without having this imaginary number? When are we going to think about how much of our peace that we're giving away and our joy that we're giving away just so these strangers feel better? Because having this date, like her email was not based on her wanting to know her dates. Her email was about having the date so that, quote, they are happy. Who cares if they're happy? Where is your joy? Where is your peace? God puts in you intuition. God gives you signs through your body of how far along you are and how your baby is doing and how well you're doing without the first test, without any intervention at all. Learn to lean on that. Start now trusting yourself, because see, all of these things that they put in you to have to run off to somebody to get validation of your dates or what your, this test says or that test says, that's all sowing the seeds of doubt in you, that you don't really know what you're doing unless they tell you. I'm telling you right now, that's not how God made things. That's not how He designed this world to work. He gave a baby two parents, and those two parents know more about what's best for that baby than anybody else in the world. And they always will in that childhood. If they are God-fearing, good parents, obviously. I know there are bad parents out there. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking to you. I'm talking to the mama who is trying to do all the right things, but in so doing is doubting herself rather than trusting God. I want to empower you to be mama. to know that you know what you're talking about, to know that what your gut feeling is valid. I want to empower you to know, are you doing well or are you not? Are you 20 weeks or 30 weeks? Are you, expecting twins or expecting singletons? Like, these things are not only defined by the medical system. You can know so many of these things. So when it comes to dates, when it comes to when your baby is due, yeah, an ultrasound can tell you that, but so can a lot of other things. And just because, quote, they want you to run off and get that first trimester ultrasound does not mean that you have to. You have options, you have choices. You decide, not them. Okay. Now, I will say that I left out a few things the first time I recorded this, and you probably noticed there was a cut if you're watching the video. So it is possible that this wasn't as cohesive as it needed to be, because I went back and re-recorded the second half, and I'm not 100% sure what I had already said in the first half. So if this didn't make sense or you have questions, feel free to email me. I'll help clarify it as much as I need to. And if there's more questions that arise, I'll record another episode about this in the future. But my main goal in everything I do with this podcast is for you to lean into your relationship with God and lean away from the world taking your joy and taking your peace and taking your intuition. I want you to be healthy and strong and empowered to be the woman that God designed you to be. And this is just one part of it. If you are pregnant, or if you are wanting to be pregnant, I highly, highly encourage that you consider the online Christian childbirth education course, because all of those things that they ought to be covering in your prenatal care but don't, I do cover. You learn everything you need to know, all the way from preconception all the way through breastfeeding, like the entire gamut of time. You were learning all of the things, okay? You're learning about prenatal nutrition. You're learning about how to keep yourself low risk. You're learning about how to go through labor. You're learning about birth itself. You're learning about that first latch. You're learning about postpartum care. You learn about all the things, okay? So if you're in the traditional system, you're not getting that education in your prenatal care like you should. You need this course. So go over to go.yourbirthgodsway.com/CEC and get signed up, get started on that. Don't wait, don't put it off, because so much of it makes a difference early. Like the nutrition stuff, you need that now. Even if you're not pregnant yet, if you want to have more babies, you need that now, because you want that kind of nutrition on board before the baby is even made. All right, hope that all made sense. Hope it helped you a lot. I'll see you back here next week. If you were blessed by today's episode, please take a minute to share it with another mama friend you know needs this info, or post a screenshot on your Instagram stories and tag me so I'll know you loved this episode. Then come hop into our Facebook group to find your people and have some like-minded support throughout your week. Also, I'd love it if you'd head to YouTube and subscribe to my channel. You can find links for all of these things in the show notes. I'm so thankful for you, and I look forward to hanging out again with you right here next week.